and I think that that's what has brought some of you in here was the special program about Indian mounds. Cindy Reed will be recounting for us a document that we found in our archives in about the 1930s by a couple of guys who recount the digging and excavation of Indian mounds when they were young boys. So this is a first-hand account, very close to the actual history. Of course, you take it with a grain of salt, but you have to believe that they're telling you for some reason. So we're very excited to hear all of this. And then after that, Jeannie will give us some, she's very factual with a lot of documentation and so forth. That's the teacher. And she will share with us a lot of documents and interesting things that she has. So let's get right to it. And I'll turn the floor over to Cindy.
Okay. Before I actually start to read, I am going to pass the attendance sheet around. This is something that we do. If you're a member, please check off your name. And if you're not a member, if you're a guest, if you would just write your name down so that we have a count of who was here tonight. Appreciate it. Here you go, Derek. Lanny, as you know, well, some of you know, he's been scanning all the documents in the in our historical room. And he came across some and he said he thought they were very interesting. And so I did too, and I was laughing as I read them. They were just kind of unusual documents. So, let me introduce the original.
I agree.
Saved a spot over here for you too.
What?
We saved a spot over
Save
here
you a
for
chair
you
right
too.
up front.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Joyce.
No problem.
Nice to see you here.
Walk right through here. Here, I'll get you a chair.
Everybody seated?
Stay right there, I'll get you.
That's it by the cookie.
The first paper that I have to read was written up, and I'm not quite sure, but I think it was Thorne Smith, because Thorne is the creator of this last letter I'm going to read. And Thorne and Chase was Chase Newman, and Chase lived out in Danby Township, and this is some information that Jeannie has. So she'll share that part with you. But this first one tells about the Indian Mound. And it says the ringleaders in the Agassiz chapter. And these boys made up a chapter, as some boys make up, and they called it Agassiz. And Jeannie will explain what that means also. But at the top here it says there's Chase Newman, John Perigo, and Thorne Smith. And they're the originators of this. And so in this document, it says that the above, those three names, were active members very much interested in nature study, which consisted of killing red squirrels and essaying the taxidermist's art, catching snakes and pickling in alcohol, collecting different kinds of wood, arrowheads, shells, stamps, and in fact trying a little of everything heard of. It says Chase noticed the elevations on his father's farm, and from that grew our exploration. The time was nearing 42 years ago. Files of the Observer would give the exact time. I don't remember the first time we dug into the mound, but I can clearly see it and would say it was 4 feet at the highest point and 30 or 40 feet in diameter. The soil was black loam. I think we started digging in the spring quite early and abandoned it after having gone down perhaps 3 feet. Sometime later, Mr. Newman told us to finish our digging and fill up the hole as he wanted to use the land. I cannot remember all of the boys that went out the first time, but think there were only the 3 of us. The second time was a Saturday afternoon, a pleasant afternoon, and several other members of the chapter were along. With the exception of the above 3 members, to tell the plain truth, our other members were noisemakers at all times. They did not take the nature study business at all seriously and in the end broke up the chapter. Included in the above remarks were H. Claire Newman, Herb Holloway, Bob Wooden, Eugene Smith, and others whose names I do not recall. There were two others, Hugh Welfare, who came very near our ideal, but as he was not available except at rare intervals, we never did find out on which side of the house he did belong. Another was Charlie Goss, but he was inclined to explode at any time and join the noisemakers. Getting back to the mound, it was rather late on that Saturday afternoon when we started to dig. I remember that Chase dug and I dug, and that the rest of the gang devoted all their time to playing Injun around the hole. War dances and yelling that could have been heard for miles. We dug and found nothing except that black dirt until we were down 4 feet when the soil seemed to turn to red in spots, but no bones to be seen. Reluctantly, we decided to fill the hole when in an idle moment, I pushed my shovel to its depth in the bottom of the hole. Something different was there, for my shovel grated and went through some object. It did not take us long to unearth a skull, but alas, my shovel had gone through it and terrifically wounded some brave's head. We found leg bones and arm bones as well as other parts, perhaps including the pelvic bones. The engines outside the hole were pretty well cowed and became sufficiently interested to help us carry the bones home. Remember, we were boys, mightily interested, but without the training necessary to do anything with our find. The bones laid around in a box for some time. At that time, Ross Holloway, then teaching school at Carroll, I may be mistaken here, he had them, and anyway, wherever he was, he had them, and I suppose they were never returned. We surely had lost interest in them. I remember no glass case. There were no other skeletons in the mound, no relics, no clothing, no wood, no nothing. It was the only skeleton ever dug up by any boy in our gang. There is no reason to believe that the bones have opened us, and I can see no reason whatever for any attempt to so identify them. Other mounds were in the same field and could probably be located at this day. We simply picked the biggest one, and really there was but little choice. It was over 40 years since I made that terrific wound in that skull, and I can distinctly remember the crunch of my shovel when it came in contact with the skull. We were not frightened as darkness descended on us before we finished our task of filling the hole, but that band of Injuns that accompanied us did a lot of talking about ghosts and ceased yelling. I have been careful not to put down anything except what I distinctly remember. I do not think our find caused any excitement in Portland because it was not the first time that bones had been found. The banks of the Looking Glass have yielded me many such things. We never thought of associating any deed of bravery with our find. It was just a mound builder skeleton such as had been found in hundreds of mounds in the Central States. I do know that in the light of more mature knowledge, we would not have dug into the mound without competent advice. Much valuable information has been lost by such ill-directed digging. We were boys thirsting for knowledge in a field that had and has no limit. We had no books beyond the high school encyclopedia and Webster's Dictionary Extra. All about the long-lost skeleton of Okina's 29th cousin of King Tut and last living second great-uncle of Cleopatra, found in what is now Portland's only industry, a hog yard, smells to heaven, coming and going, bragged of by Portland's leading papers. What's the good old town coming to? And at the bottom, there's a little note. It says, if we only had had Bemis to guide us in those days, alas, alas, and no disrespect to Mrs. Ingalls and Lottie. So this, I believe, was Thorne, and that was his little pardon? I believe that this was written the same time he wrote Chase, and that was in 1930. And in there, was, there's another paper that I copied, but the paper is so brittle that part of the bottom page is gone. So I'm kind of guessing at some of that a
So
little
Cindy,
bit.
these guys were doing this in like in the 1890s?
Yeah, well, yeah.
1890?
Or before, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is, he had this included in there, and it says archaeology. And in this, at the very end, it talks of the list of specimens that they had found. So I will read just this little bit. It says archaeology, the science of antiquities or the ancient works of man. The archaeological remains found in Portland and vicinity indicate this was the home and hunting grounds of the American Indian. Mounds are found indicating that the ancient mound builders dwelt here at some time. These mounds are very ancient, as the history of Ione County, 1872, says that the Indians residing here have no knowledge of the building of the mounds. Mounds exist on the north banks of the Looking Glass River, and the site of the old founding is said by old settlers to be the burial mounds of the Indians. Original observations have been made on our farm in Danby, near Grand River. A mound has been found there which is circular at the base and is 15 or 20 feet in diameter. It gradually ascends until it attains a height of about 3 feet above the surrounding grounds. In May or April 1888, Thorne Smith and myself, so I'm thinking this is Chase that wrote this, opened the mound near its center. We found 2 skeletons, both in a rather poor state of preservation. The first skeleton was very badly decayed and only a few bones of the hand were saved. This skeleton was embedded in stones, broken into pieces of 2 or 3 pound weights each. The second skeleton was in a better state of preservation. Several bones were saved in the skull vertebrae and one of the arm bones. No relics were found at the time, but since then, specimens, 6, was found on top of the mound. The bodies seem to have been placed in the mound without regard to position. And this is a list of specimens, and they were all in Danby Township and somewhere on his farm. They found 2 bird arrows and 5 arrowheads. So that was Chase. Now, this letter is from Thorne to Chase, and these were the 2 that were conspirators. And he was in Birmingham, Michigan, February 26th, that's tomorrow, 1930. It says, Dear Chase, I have read with a great deal of interest the newspaper accounts of Chief Okamus, running all through these various articles as they endeavor to convince the reader and even the writer that he lived to an extraordinary old age. Apparently they doubt it, and yet no one wants to contradict it. I would say that the most recent date given for his birth is correct, probably 1779, which would make his age have been 79, a long life for an Indian, else our modern ideas of constant health care must be scrapped. I believe further that any reputable physician would say that in the absence of any proof as to date of birth, whether the subject be white, red, or black, any statement of extreme old age is to be questioned. It seems to be a failing of mankind to exaggerate, and especially when one has lived beyond his 70. It becomes something to boast of. Witness the reputed age of our colored friends, which may go as high as 150 years. One must be slow in believing newspaper stories and newspaper writers. They have space to fill. Many of them are young chaps who don't care much what they write as long as it fills space. As a matter of fact, they are very ordinary individuals, and yet people endow them with superhuman abilities. Look at a Detroit Sunday newspaper's feature section as an example, and remember that to a great many readers, this is the most interesting part of the paper. When I see a person reading such stuff, I cannot but help wondering the percentage of empty space in his head. You know, I am quite a preacher when I get started, and I have preached many sermons in this manner as hundreds of stamp customers can testify. The strange part of it is that they come back for more. I want proof of any statement, whatever its nature, and lacking that I am not very much interested. Now Clay has an imagination, and I do believe that given one egg, just one, he could go to the poultry business and before the end of even 6 months have the world so heavily populated with either roosters or hens that we could not hear ourselves for the crowing or cackling. If he would but turn his mind to fiction instead of trying to make history, the world would be at his feet. Why don't he try his hand at story writing? Why not suggest it to him? He has made statements which contain not a grain of truth, and by so going into print has provided fresh material for the history of Chief Okemos. You can imagine at some future time a young writer as rewriting the history of Okemos and giving Clay's statements a place. Tell him to have his eyeballs ironed out and not be so pop-eyed. In all respects to Henry Clay, he has not yet and may never find the track in which his mind and actions should run. If I had his real ability and the ability to use it, no one could compute my wealth. Other men have found themselves at his age, why not he? I'm going to send the clipping you enclosed with your letter to JWP, that is. He is an authority on elevators, and his company builds the largest grain elevators in the world. When he began his work for the John Metcalf Company, he was afraid to call his name his own, but he carried it off in his usual style. Now he is a vice president. It is not his fault that he has no kids, at least I don't think so far, for her twin sister had to adopt one, if my memory is not at fault. I continue my garden work with all the interest I ever had. It's the one thing about which there is more to learn than has been learned. I am tearing things out and rebuilding all the time, and though I am making mistakes in the eyes of landscape gardeners, it's my own. If after I make a planting I don't like it, I can change it a dozen times if necessary. I therefore prefer to go it alone until I am convinced that I never can make a job at landscaping. I am looking for a farm not further away than Howell of about 60 acres or possibly 80 with a lake fully enclosed by the land and capable of supporting at least one fish. Said farm must be very moderate in price. I have been offered two very recently at $10,000 and refused to consider them. Another at $26,000 were not considered for a second. Fred Woodworth has a place at Pinckney for which he paid about $40 per acre. And that is near my intentions, else I don't buy. Anyway, the matter is in the hands of my real estate agent, and I refuse to deal otherwise. I don't know what I will do with a farm, but in any event, I will own some land and water. I have considerable real estate now, and the only benefit derived is to the state and county in taxes. I do know, however, that I will never make any money on a farm. We carry in stock here at the house one Czech, meaning a Czechoslovakian, or something similar to that. She calls herself a Bohemian. Anyway, it relieves the missus of the heavy work and a good deal of the light work, so your excuse for not staying long enough to say more than howdy is invalid. We are planning Florida next winter, or at least a part of it. There are fish waiting for me down there. One of your former students, Miss Gillette, I think I saw her last fall, landscaping a place near mine. She was as brown as an Indian, but was going at her work as if she knew what she was doing. The place was beautifully done at the time, but I doubt some of the trees living. Pretty difficult to plant any size birch tree in the late summer, let alone the fall, and have it live. I am not going to seek any advice at present. I want to see what I can do at first. In our next garden contest, I'm going to ask Judson Bradway to give Miss Gillette as one judge. Last fall it was Phillips, whom perhaps you know. One of the others was a dignified lady who gardens by proxy, and the other was other of the three, an ex-school teacher who in her days of past usefulness married a gardener old enough to be her son, if one can express it in reverse. I'm not asking for Miss Gillette with any idea of winning the first prize, but every time a good artist gets his name before the public, it helps. I always favored the women in women's work, and I feel that the fact that they do not conduct a nursery gives them a greater latitude in purchasing material. Maybe you don't get what I'm trying to express. I buy from Vermont to Florida, wherever I can get what I want. Just now I am studying a hedge and have decided on armor privet. One man wants $30 per 100, another $20. Corey wants $15, and so on down to Kellogg, the strawberry man, who asked $6.48. And all have the same size. I get more kick out of this studying required than it cost me. I want to be long now. I won't be long now until my man Friday is on the job and there is a lot to do. I also am busy in Detroit, yet neither job is allowed to interfere with the other. The more there is to do, the less one has time to think of his troubles, if he has any. With these few words I close. Mrs. S. and Catherine will be driving to East Lansing on Friday, I think, and will deliver the Okemos material to you. They stay at Wilson's Old Friends. Wilson is general manager or something of the Motor Wheel Corporation. Yours very sincerely, Thorne Smith. It's just kind of interesting to hear what they had to say in those days. I hope you enjoyed that. Margaret? Are you all done? Jeannie, I'm sorry.
Well, the first thing I want to tell you is that Chase Smith, this guy that started this thing, he was a Newman. He was a great grandson of Elisha Newman, who came here, bought land in 1833, about 240 acres, around the mouth of the Looking Glass, built the mills. He's the great grandson of him. And I have in this little thing, you never get tired of doing materials for your students. And I also researched, found what the Agassiz chapter was. They named themselves, they were idealizing after some scientists who were at Harvard that started the field of scientific research of nature. And I've written that up here for you. So if you want to, and on the back of that, on the back of this, I showed you the genealogy or the roots of Chase Newman and who his grandfather was, his great-grandfather was Elisha Newman, his grandfather, and all that stuff is here about the family on this page. So if you want to take those and pass that around, I think I only have maybe 15, 20 copies, so if you're a couple, maybe just take one. And Chase Newman, when he was born in 1870, his father lived in a house that was right here where this library is. I think that's kind of interesting. And I dug out some maps from 1891 to show where their farm was. But, on the back, no, this other map. Well, I didn't give you that one. Anyway, this little, I've got some materials here that I'm not going to pass around, but this I'm going to put up in the library. It has some excerpts about the mound builders in Michigan, and there's some excellent articles in here about some of our first archaeological explorers in the state. Out of Detroit was Bella Hubbard, and you know who that is, don't you, Bella Hubbard? Bella Hubbard, and he lived in Detroit when Governor Cass was here, and he did a lot of research and a lot of writing about around Detroit, about the spring well mounds. In fact, I think I pictured the spring well mounds right here on one of these things. This is all of Bella Hubbard's writings out of the materials that comes out of the archives from the state of Michigan when they were collecting history for about 30 years. And all those volumes are up in our library. There's 40 volumes. So if you ever get up there, you can look at the index and look up a town or a person, and it'll tell you which book to look in, and you find some real interesting things about Michigan history. This is the article from Bella And there's another article in here. Oh, this is the stuff on, it's not a mound, but it's about the earthworks up in Lyon, or up in Muir, called Arthurburg Hill. Have you ever heard of that? Okay, you've all heard of Arthurburg Hill. This is a study that was done on Mount Pleasant. And I got a lot of this material years ago from Bill, and made copies and gave him back his books. He's got all the books. So that's going to all be up in the library. Here's a little thing about Indian history in the Grand River Valley that was written up for me when I was working on a river project, the Grand River Heritage Watershed Project. And she gives a whole summary of archaeology in our area, the Greater Lansing area, or the Greater Portland area. So this will all be up in the library.
Where in the library will that be?
I'm just going to put it up on the shelf where the books are. And there's also an article in here from I can't remember his first name, but Grand Rapids has preserved their mounds. I've never seen them. Have you? Have you ever been to Grand Rapids to see that mounds, Bill? Have you? Somebody has? Has anybody been? You have?
Yeah, they're in a park, they're just grassy green.
Okay, is there, yeah, well, this is they had, this is a little read about the mounds there on the Grand River. That's below the rapids or above the rapids, wherever that was. So this is going to be some materials, and I've also included two maps that I made when I was working on the river. This is a map from Portland to Lyons, and it has on the river the sites, and on the back it tells you what the sites are. So if you're ever in a kayak or a canoe going down the river, this map will be up here in this book that you can copy it if you want, take it to the copy machine and make yourself copies. And I have a few of these left. I made them about 5-6 years ago, and I've sold most of them for the Heritage Water Trail. But that'll be in this book. And also, if you're really interested, here's an archaeological map I made. This comes out of Bill's book that he loaned me some years ago. And this is a section of our section of Hinsdale's archaeological map that was written in 1930 out of University of Michigan. And it's about 40 pages of maps, but both Bill and I have taken them to printers and glued them together because you can't see where the trail goes from one page to the other to put shrink them and put them together. So that's what this map is. And you might want to look at that. On the back it has some eras of prehistoric culture, like when the bow and arrow came in and when they started making pottery. This is all of this little handout here, this little map. So anybody's welcome to come up and look at this at any time, but right now I want to give you some. I made the map of, this is a 1891 plat map of Danby Township, and on the back is Portland Township. And on these maps you can find where the farm was that Chase and his friends were digging around. Here's Danby. It's right up here on the river. And I'm going to hand, I've only got 12 copies of this map. So here's a picture of Chase. Whoops. Yeah, I know it's hard. Here's what he looked like. I found a picture. I have some materials from the Newman family. That's him and his wife at a family gathering. I took it, put it on my computer, and blow it up. It's kind of grainy, but you can at least get an image of what he looked like.
Which Newman?
Chase.
Oh.
Now I'm going to talk about Chase, what I know about Chase, and a little bit about the Agassi chapter. Here, if you want to pass that around, anybody wants to look at this. I've got the, I did make some copies of some of these things that's in this book. I'm going to put in the library. If after the session anybody wants them, I only have a few copies of each.
Jeannie, you're putting that in the genealogy room?
Huh?
In the
Yeah, I'm going to
genealogy
put
room?
this collection that I've got in a little portfolio in the genealogy room, and I also made a few extra copies of what I have in there for anybody who wants to look and come and take them home. This is the Grand Rapids stuff, I'll just put it all up here. This is the Bella Hubbard stuff.
Genealogy room?
Well, you might be interested in Bella Hubbard. He was an explorer like you. This is that stuff from, I'm just going to tell you these materials. This is some materials from the state archaeologist, and this is the stuff on Arthur Burke Hill. I only have 2 copies of that. So you're welcome to take that when you go. Anybody? So, I know, how many people have been to the Mounds in Ohio? Okay, Tor, Ben, Bill, everybody. So you know a lot about Mounds already. You know. But basically what the mound builders were, it was a society that lived in the, they think it came up the Mississippi River from the south or from the Central America and came into the Ohio Valley where it was really prominent and where it grew to its height. And some people think that it flourished because it was at the time when they were cultivating corn. And when they brought those seeds up from South or Central America and put them in Indiana soil or you know, soil up in Iowa or in the Ohio Valley, they got great corn and they got to be very wealthy and healthy and rich. So that's how that, and the mounds were of 2 kinds that we all know. Either there was a burial mound, which most of them were, and usually there was 1 grave in the mound, and sometimes it was bones and sometimes it was burned and ashes, but it had layers. And they built these mounds, as most people probably already know, that it wasn't just dirt piled in the thing, they had it layered so that it drained, and what was in there was preserved for a long time because they would put like gravel and different kinds of sand and different levels of soil, and they would take that soil from around the mound in baskets and build it up to build whatever they were building. And another kind of mound would be a mound that had a flat top, and usually there was some kind of a ritual temple or place, just like the pyramids, or not the pyramids, but you know, like you see in different cultures around the world. These things aren't unique to Indian cultures in America. They were, you can find this in history throughout the world, of burial mounds and different kinds of things people made with stones and gravel. But when the French got here in LaSalle in 1680s, wherever that was, 1670s, coming from Montreal, when they started in the priest of the, what kind of, who the priest that wrote all this, that wrote all this? Huh?
Jesuits?
Yeah, the Jesuits, thanks. The Jesuits are the only ones that recorded all this history. They would come and see these things. It wasn't just mounds. There were these great gardens that were just, they went for acres and they were very well, but they had trees in them that were hundreds of years old, so they know that had to be a couple hundred years these people had left. So archaeologists figure it was sometime between 1200 and 400 AD that this culture existed in the Great Lakes, and why it came from the Ohio Valley up into Michigan, probably just like any other town. It gets crowded or it falls and the guy on top pounds too many heads and they kill him and break away and go build another culture somewhere else. It's just like the Bible and all the things, that's just the way history repeats itself. But so these mounds that they found when the white settlers got here, which was in the 1800s, after the War of 1812, they started documenting. And some of these materials, like Bella Hubbard, he did a lot of documentation on the mounds. And even our president, Thomas Jefferson, who was very enthralled with the native culture and the buildings and the things that they had done, because after the Revolutionary War, Washington came over the mountains and was speculating in the upper Ohio Valley, and they were buying land and getting themselves rich, and what they found there they couldn't believe because it was already developed with a lot of, and that came back. Jefferson was the third president, so that was about 1803 or whatever that was when he was president. And so they were enthralled with what these people had built in the greater river valleys of North America. So Chase Newman, I think I found him a very interesting fellow. He ended up graduating from the Portland schools. He went to Michigan State or Michigan Agricultural College. He studied mechanical engineering. And he started teaching drawing classes when he was still in undergraduate school. And he got a professorship, I guess, because he taught there for over 40 years and lived in Lansing. And he was quite, the Newmans were quite the family because there's a document I've read, or a story I've read, that his sister, Ruby, who was his younger sister, wrote a little family history, and she said what a great guy Chase was. He grew up on that farm. It was, if you go down Old Okemos Road, you know, where they cut it off by the school there, you can't go through anymore. If people have ever tried to go through there, but it used to be a through road. And just a little ways, right in the bend of the river there, it goes out like that. On the right side of that road, between the road and the river, and on your map, you can see it, if you look on Danby Township, you'll see the name Newman on that 70-acre piece of property. Can you find it on your maps?
Yeah.
You seen it? Okay. That's where his father, Franklin, who was Elmer Newman's son, but anyway, Elmer Newman was built the willow mills. He had a son, Franklin. Franklin begot Chase. So his father built a house on the corner of Brush and Lincoln Street, and that story's in that paper I gave you. It tells you a little bit about that house his father built. But he bought this farm because he had like 3 or 4 boys and he wanted to keep them busy. But what happened, I think he was into the temperance movement. He would go down Detroit, he was writing papers and editing things. But his wife and his children pretty much ran that farm. They sold milk, made cheese. They worked and picked fruit, nuts and hazelnuts and all kinds of things, and harvested all this food and came to town and sold it. Chase drove the milk wagon for his family to peddle that milk. And there was a time when somebody else started up a milk thing in Portland and undercut his milk by a penny, and his father said, that's enough, we can't make any money, we're not doing it anymore, so that was the end. But that's what Chase Newman is. So when he was with his buddies, when he was working on that farm, they would go in the spring and stay there till fall. They had to go, come to school, to get to school from the farm, but then they moved into the city in the winter. And that's that Newman family that he grew up in. But what I found interesting about him is that I think he was a very well-read guy, and he was very interested in where he lived in the rivers and the Portland and the Indian history here. And probably like all the rest of us, they've been down to Shimnacon trying to see what we can imagine or how that was. But when you were in Shimnacon, did you go up the hill or did you just go to the turnaround?
Just to the turnaround.
Oh, see, you have to walk up the hill and follow the little path.
Because the Boy Scouts or somebody had.
Yeah, DNR bought that from them.
Oh, okay.
Bill and a bunch of people in Danby got the DNR to buy that property after they cut the trees, I think, right? So, yeah, if you ever go there, you need to take that little walk up the trail, and then you go up to the top of the bluff. And if you get to the bluff and you don't see the circle of stones with the big stone that says Okemos, what?
The stone's about a foot high, it's white.
Is it only about a foot high? No, it's bigger than that.
It's 3 feet.
Wait a minute, here, I have this little thing on Shimnacon. Oh, you do? Here's a picture of it in here. I made these for, when I was having a thing on the river.
thing.
Well, I mean, I used to go to the Quiet Water Symposium, and I wrote this little thing on Shimnakan and Okemos, and that's his,
Yeah.
Just before you get to the river, you'll see
Is
the
it?
stone.
So where is
Shimnakan, if you go, you have to go down Charlotte Highway and turn on Peak Road. Turn right on Peak Road, go to the end where it's a dead end, and you'll hit Okemos Road, because Okemos Road doesn't go through from Portland anymore. They blocked it off. And then you turn south, and you follow that road to the end, and there'll be a little turnaround, and the DNR turnaround at the end.
It's where the buses turn around.
Yeah, you have to go to Okemos Road,
Say no
and
parking.
you turn around, park your car, and you'll see a little sign there. Is the sign still there for the trail? Gone?
You have to get out of your car, and then you have to walk due east
Towards the river.
towards the river, and on your right, as you walk along there, will be the remnants of all the little apple trees that have been there for years and years.
But where that turnaround is that past where the mark of the Daughters of the American Revolution put the stone where the actual mission house was? Shimnakan used to be a mission. It was a Methodist mission, and it was a double log structure. Half of it was the mission house, and the other half was where the missionary lived. And after the Indians left in 1856, they sent them up north, and some went to Walpole Island. The community used that for a town hall for a while. And I think on one of those maps, it even shows it. Who's got does somebody have my little book? Oh, Margie did, okay. So, questions or comments, Mike?
In the document there, and I've heard this in the past, of there being a recording mound on the north shore of the Looking Glass
Oh.
somewhere. Is that still there, or what's
That is, if you look on that, here, I'm gonna pass these around, people can look at these. If you look on this, this archaeological map that Bill has, that has the whole book, you'll see they're a mile upstream from the mouth of the Looking Glass on the north side of the river. I think that land is now owned by Manning, who has that. It's the left quarter of section 34, and I think there's a cement factory there. Was that cement house, and the next one is Chris Fedewa's farm, isn't it? Chris Fedewa lives there, and back, there's 2 lanes that go back in there. You have to get permission, but back there is where the mounds were, on the high banks of the river. I don't know if you can see them from the south side or not, but there were mounds there, and as people have said, the Indians that were here when the settlers came were the 3 fires. They were Ottawa, Potawatomi,
Oh, I
and
know where it's
Chippewa.
at. I know.
The Chippewa came down from the St. Mary's River into the Saginaw Bay area and populated. Chief Pontiac was part of that. The Ottawas came from Manitou Island, came around through the Traverse Bay area, the west side of the state, and came down the lake, came up the Grand River, and the whole Grand River Valley was Ottawa. And then you come up the Maple, and where the Maple connects to the watershed for the Saginaw Bay, that's where the Chippewa end and the Ottawa begin. Now the Potawatomi are all down the southern Michigan, around St. Joe River, and around Kalamazoo. So that's Bill.
Maple syrup and sugaring time, they all used to come meet in Danby Township. And they sugared the maple trees.
Right.
The Potawatomi came north, the Chippewa went southwest, and the Ottawa came south. And they were all buddies, and they were called the Council of the 3 Fires. And their languages were pretty close to the same, and after the white men get there, they had, frankly, a big drunk, from what I can see. And
Well, you
partied.
know, I think it's unfair to always say the Indians were drunk and ragged and dirty, because that was when the whites got here. They were at the end. 98% of the Indian population in this part of the country was already dead. From wars, intertribal wars, wars with they fought for the French against the British, then the Americans came, and there was a War of 1812. They had smallpox, typhoid, all kinds of diseases, and by the time that the whites came here in the 1830s to plow the land and cut the forest down, these people were they had no, before that, each band had their summer village, their winter village, their own little maple sugar bush, their own berry patch, their fishing grounds. They had their places that they moved on seasonal. They had summer houses, winter houses, and they moved in this area in a river valley, and that was their homeland. And a clan or extensive clans, and then on feast days or whatever it was, like the sugar maple times, a lot of people would come together for social activities, games, finding wives, things like that. But the sugar that the Indians made kept the voyagers or the traders for furs alive for about 100 years as they paddled all around, because they'd make these cakes with corn and berries and hunks of meat. And when the settlers came here, they fed a lot of the settlers for the first couple of years because they didn't have anything but salt, pork, and flour. So that's all I know.
Good job.
Question?
I was going to say that a few weeks ago I was Googling the Michigan Indian mounds on the web. Found a site that had detailed latitude and longitude to arc-second better precision for many of the mounds. And if you want to find, that's a good way to find them on Google Earth or whatever. Though it appears that many of them in the farming lands have just been plowed so flat that you can't see anything anymore.
And the state archaeologists won't tell you exactly, like I've tried to find out down in Shinnecock exactly where the village was, and they won't tell you what they know, because they don't want people going there and digging up for artifacts or stealing things. You know, so
The foundation stones of the cabins
Yeah.
are still there.
exactly.
If you go to Okemos' stone, you'll see it's pure white, Daughters of the American Revolution,
Uh-huh.
about a foot high.
Uh-huh.
And you go straight south along the river.
Uh-huh.
On your right, you'll see there was a pond there where there used to be a little sawmill.
Uh-huh.
And then on the right, you'll see flat stones that they used to put the timbers on when they built their cabins. So they're still there.
Well, actually, a Methodist minister, John Compton, in the community down there, with that Reverend Hickey that came in and blessed them and all that, he's the one that got the land for him, had them buy some land and build this little community. Before that, they lived on the other side of the river, about a mile west of there, where Arlene Rice's farm was. Where Arlene Rice's farm was, if anybody knows Arlene Rice, on her deed, it says that that was the Beringer trading post, and he owned it in 1835, and that's where the first trading post was in Danby Township. And every trading post I ever know is either on the same side of the river the Indians lived or right across the river, but it's always on a trail, and it's close to where the Indians are moving so they can do their business, do their trading, and make it convenient. And when you go, if you ever go there, like Bill says, you can, if you ever get up that trail, and you'd be high on the bluffs, and you'll see down below the river, and when you find that grave, and he said there's that gully or whatever that is, it looks like a little drop off there. And I haven't found any of the, I didn't know there was a mill there, but I know that there were cabins there. And if you walk through the woods in the spring or the late fall when the leaves are off the tree, and if you get off the path and walk in the woods a little bit, you'll find, because they said they built 20 cabins there. And the people, they came to Portland and gave speeches and gave talks and raised money, and the people from Portland sent the windows and the door frames and some of the shingles, cedar shakes for the house, for the cabins. But the people in the area helped the Indians build those houses and that mission house. And you know, people, there were people, witnesses that were here that have written about that, and you can find those little stories here and there. Any more comments? Anybody want to? Yes, Gary?
Have we got a while for me to read a page or two?
Yeah.
Something that might be highly argumentative?
Oh, well,
Bill, you aren't carrying, are you? Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
This just happened Saturday night. Happened to be flicking through the History Channel about 11 o'clock, and I saw something that was just so interesting I couldn't believe it.
Why don't you stand up and
What
go
was
to
it?
the front?
I've got to read, so anyway.
Okay,
go.
quick.
Has something, don't you?
Have you ever heard of the Aztecs?
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
South, they're down in Central America.
Have you heard the new revolutionary and argumentatively thing?
About them?
That they came from Michigan and Wisconsin in the 1100s.
In 1100 AD or BC?
Hey,
Huh?
anyway, Michigan and about 100 miles north of Chicago in Wisconsin at
Who's telling you this?
Lake Mills, a bunch of Indian scientists that have been researching a lot in the last few years, and they've DNA'd all the tribes lately. And this is how they came to believe this, okay? Is that the mound builders started in Michigan and Wisconsin at Lake Mills. There's also a rock lake next to the town of Lake Mills that supposedly has underwater pyramids. Okay.
So
They
water
built,
must have been
in this little town of Wisconsin, they built a structure like I remember the old frontier Western Army forts, built out of tall tree trunks, 30 feet high, buried in the ground, and tree trunks about 6-8 inches apart in a rectangle, kind of like a fort. This was thought to be the first actual building that they did.
And
Okay, then.
This is an archaeological study?
Yes,
Okay. What year was this? You said 1100?
that's the time frame that they're guessing about.
AD?
Yes,
Okay.
in Michigan and Wisconsin. Okay, then they decided to go west. When they got to the Mississippi, some of the population, the tribes broke off and were called the Mississippians. The major group of them that left Wisconsin then went on clear to what is now Salt Lake City, or the Great Salt Lake, and they settled there for over 100 years. After they'd been, actually, they said 20 moons. After they'd been in the Great Salt Lake about 20 moons, their medicine man had a vision and told them to go south, a long ways south, until they saw an eagle with a snake in its talons by a particular shaped rock. Well, they did this, and it took them 20 moons to get there. And it's now called Mexico City. And they've also DNA matched these original mound builders from Michigan and Wisconsin to the Paiute Shoshone tribes along the way. Some of them split off along the way to Salt Lake. Their name for Michigan meant a place of fishes. And now this is Ashland, Wisconsin, but the original name was Aztlan, spelled just like Aztec, only with an L-A-N on the end. Bill, are you laughing?
No. I like a good story.
Okay.
That's a Saturday night.
Wait a minute, wait a
That's a
minute. Does
History
Torp have
Channel?
something?
Yeah.
Did you have something you wanted
No,
to share?
Jerry was weeding the flower garden behind our house. And here's what she found. With evidence of Indians right there.
You want me to pass that around or not?
Sure.
I'll just show it? Okay.
This was
The Torps Smith lived on a piece of property that was once owned by the Newman family, because they owned so much land around the river. And if you go up James Street, at the top of the hill, just before you get to, not Charlotte Highway, but what is it?
Really right behind the laundry.
Right behind the laundry, but their land slopes down like that, and at the bottom is the Grand River. But that Grand River Road, Avenue, used to be the DeWitt Road. And that what used to, before it was DeWitt Road, it was a wagon road, and before it was a wagon road, it was an Indian trail on the south side of the Looking Glass that followed the Looking Glass, and it eventually crossed the river and went to DeWitt, where the next big village gathering or villages or of Ottawa or Indian families lived. So it's probably on that trail, you know, probably somebody was hiding up in the woods there watching because the trails are all following the deer, right? So we know that Indian trails are the best routes from one place to another. It's on the best ground, and it's usually the high ground, so probably that some Indian was sitting up there and shot a deer or shot something with that arrowhead.
Oh, missed it.
Or missed it. Oh, that's cool. That's a beautiful arrowhead. I have no idea what kind of stone that is, though.
That's
Thank you.
a wonderful presentation. We'd like to thank Cindy and Jeannie. And let's take about 10 minutes and we'll have some coffee and